Hi there, you're watching Gardens and Graveyards. My name is Charisma, and today we are in the garden and we're talking about abundance. And I've been sharing with you how you can create more abundance in your garden through seed saving, divisions, and now we're going to talk about cuttings. And to me, cuttings are the most satisfactory way to create abundance in the garden, because you literally I really shouldn't say that, because divisions are really awesome because they're already a plant, right? They already have roots, they already have plant material, and you can just dig them up and pluck them somewhere else in the garden, and that is like instant gardening. But cuttings for me has that fun balance of where I feel like I'm doing a gardening task, I'm creating a new plant. So with a cutting, what you're gonna do is you're gonna cut the top piece of a plant off, strip off their leaves, and place it in a growing medium. And then you have to care for that little top piece and help it grow until it has roots. And then once it has roots, it's just literally 2-3 leaves with some roots, and you can plant it out in the garden. Although I tend to plant them up into a 4-inch container and let them get a little bit stronger and robust. But as satisfying as divisions can be, for me, cuttings is that much more satisfactory because I have a little bit of that science going on too. A little bit of that magic. Like, how do you create more plants from, there's no roots and there's almost no foliage. So for me, that's like extra fun. So we are in the medicine garden again. I take most of the cuttings that I like to take are in the medicine garden. Let's see. Herbs are super, super easy to create abundance with cuttings. They take to this way of division and propagation really, really, really well. Many herbs don't clump out, so either you're going to grow them by seed or you're going to grow them by cutting. The benefit of growing them by cutting is you know that you're getting the exact same plant as the plant you're cutting it from. So it's basically a clone. Not all plants work for cuttings. I can't think of any bulbs that you would do a cutting on. Any kind of like grassy, strappy kind of texture, you're not going to get a cutting from. But if you have a softwood or hardwood stem, you're good to go. I do use a couple of different methods for rooting my cuttings. So softwood cuttings typically do really well in either a glass of water, which I will do in a pinch, or in sterile sand. Make sure your sand is sterile. It'll say that on the bag, like playground sand or some kind of sterile landscaping sand. Beach sand has salt, it has bacteria, it has all kinds of stuff in it, and it's not going to be conducive to growing roots in, especially when there are no roots to grow, or there's no roots yet, so you have to give them the best shot they can have. So playground sand is great if you can add a little bit of gritty texture, like tiny pebbles. That's extra helpful. Mostly it's the sand because it stays moist and it'll adhere to the stem and keep that stem in contact with moisture as it's trying to grow its roots. The second method that I enjoy using and have been very successful with is straight perlite. You can mix it. You could do potting soil perlite, like 2 parts perlite to 1 part potting soil. But I find that that's just a waste, and just pure perlite. Get them rooted and then get them out of there and put them in potting soil. The third method, which I think I mentioned a moment ago, is just water. So some plants actually root a lot faster just in a jar of water, just plain old water. You could use filtered water and all that, but I haven't found that I needed to take that extra step for the plants that I propagate. So with that being said, today I'm going to be taking cuttings from Artemisia or wormwood, from golden oregano, purple culinary sage, pineapple sage, lemon balm, all in this area. Then we're gonna go upstairs and we're gonna take cuttings from a eucalyptus tree, a hydrangea shrub, and an edgeworthia shrub. And we're going to get some cuttings off of a few heucheras. So I think, well, let me walk you through the process, and I'm going to turn the camera around, show you everything that I have set up here, and then walk you through probably like 1 or 2 kinds of cuttings, and then we'll just zip through. I'll make sure that when I change medium, I'm telling you what medium I'm using. It is, you probably can't tell, it looks like a shady or a overcast day here on the Oregon coast, but it's actually smoky, and I'm kind of feeling it in my throat a little bit. So it might be like a longer process than I was expecting, because I might need to go in and take a little break. I do have water with me. I have a mask in case I'm like right at the very end and I'm really feeling it and I just want to mask up. Might be smart of me to just mask up through the whole thing. I don't know. I'm not really feeling like I need that so much. I also have a candle burning because there are little bugs everywhere, and it really has helped. This area is more or less cleared out since I started burning the candle. But of course, as soon as I leave this area, I will blow out the candle and not leave an open flame. There are no fires directly around me, but it is fire season. We are in, a bit of a drought, and all the smoke is from like a California fire and other fires in the east. They're not close to me, but their smoke is covering the area. Okay, so I have snips. You can use a razor blade. A lot of gardeners choose to use a razor blade, partially because these are bypass, and they don't give as clean of a cut, but I'm not doing anything super delicate. Let me show you. This is lemon thyme, and even though it has a really small stem, it's actually a little bit woody. When you get down into the root or into the crown, it's quite woody. So this is a nice strong stem, and it doesn't get pinched when I use these kinds of snips. But if I was doing a cutting on a really delicate flower or plant, I would probably want to use a razor blade just to get it a really clean cut. I have a little bit of water. I have a little bit of root tone. Looks like this. I don't always use it. It's a rooting hormone. It does help with activating roots to grow on your plants. It has a fungicide in it, which is definitely helpful, especially as we're going into fall, and here on the coast, we stay pretty moist. So anything that we could do to help not have fungus, especially on little baby plants, is really good. I also have wet wipes to clean the blades in between each cutting, just to keep it super, super clean. You could use rubbing alcohol if you have rubbing alcohol on hand. Yeah, so now I'll turn the camera around and show you what I'm going to be placing my plants in. All right, so here is my setup. I've got my candle. Try to move that out of the way to get my plants. I've got water, rooting hormone right here. And then I have this little wood tray with sand in it. And I have my labels already. This tray has a screen on the bottom, and then it's sitting inside of a nursery tray that is solid. So when I water it, it just holds the water. And because the plants are so delicate without any roots, I use this little watering can. It's literally just a bottle of water with this special nozzle on it, and it is super, super gentle when I'm watering. And then the other thing that I use, and this container was made by a friend of mine, and then my husband made me another one. It's just a little bit taller. She has this piece of wood with a nail in it to create a hole, so that it's a nice clean hole. You put it in the sand, and then you put the stem in the hole, and it just makes a big enough hole so that I'm not having to press the sand down around the plant too much, mess with it. And then, of course, it came with a handy cap, which is just a wine cork for safety purposes. You could use anything. You could use a chopstick. You could use a golf tee, whatever you got. So, yeah, that's what I've got, and we're going to get into it. So the first plant that I'm going to take cuttings from is this Artemisia, and I want a dozen plants of this, which will be very easy to get from these guys. So I'm just gonna go in here and I'm gonna cut it, and I've got 9 inches or so. Now for every one of these branches, you can just cut it here, and then I've got this. I'm gonna pull these guys off, pull the big ones off, and now I've got all of this, and then I'm just going to dip it in some water to get it moist, and I'm going to dip it in rooting hormone. And because this one's going in the taller box, I'm gonna really try to get as much of that stem coated as I can. And then I'm going to use a golf tee because it's longer, and put it in this container here. And just like that, I have a dozen cuttings. It didn't even make any kind of dent on that plant. but I don't really need more than 12 new plants. So that's how easy it is to propagate and give away and make more plants for your own garden. So I'm gonna go on and get my pineapple sage for this box and then start filling that one. Okay, so this is what the top of a pineapple sage looks like, and you want to take your cuttings from the very top growth and not a side shoot. For example, this might have one that comes out, down the stem and goes out. You want a top cutting because that's where the energy like shoots up to the top, and you're gonna have a better opportunity of growing roots from those. But if you're in a pinch and all you have are side shoots, they still take, sometimes their viability just isn't as strong. So by all means, don't cut yourself short and not take it because you don't have a top shoot. Especially if you have a failing plant. So this plant's doing great, but this was in the understory. This was like a younger shoot, and it's got a little bit of chlorosis. It has a little bit of, I don't know, little brown dots on it. So one, I would not use this as a cutting. But two, if my whole plant looked like this, I would find the healthiest one I could possibly muster, and if it was a side shoot, take the very tip like this, take these leaves off, and literally just have this, and dip this in hormone and put it in growing medium, because I would not want to lose my plant. If I can get a plant off of a few of these, then I could get rid of the diseased plant and have a clean plant to replant in that location. That being said, this is the top of the pineapple sage, and technically I have two cuttings right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut right above this branching, and now I have these two leaves, and because I want the energy to go to the roots and not to the leaves, I'm gonna cut these leaves in half. Just like that. Just to give, you want to leave some leaf there because this is how plants photosynthesize. This is how it's gonna get its energy to create roots. But you don't need all that foliage because you really want to produce roots. Now with the top, I'm just going to totally remove these larger leaves. And now I just have these little leaves, and these are okay. I could go ahead and snip just a little bit off of there so there's a little less leaf, but that wasn't as necessary as if when they're really big. Tray 1 is done. You want to make sure that you have plenty of space and air circulation and flow around all of these plants. You don't want them to end up mildewing or anything like that. So now we move into the next box. When I'm doing variegated varieties, I always try to get the ones that have the most variegation on them to really encourage that particular kind of growth, because variegated varieties tend to revert back to their natural form. So you can see here, this tip doesn't have any variegation on it. So I wouldn't want to use that to propagate if I want the variegated lemon thyme. Also with the lemon thyme, the leaves are so tiny, I don't need to cut them. And I can leave quite a few on there. There's probably 10 or 12 on there, and I'm gonna leave it like that. My lemon balm is looking a tad tired, and it is starting to go into its flowering stage, and it wants to make seeds. Let's see, this one's a little bit better. Maybe you can see that or not. So you can see these little white flowers. They will turn into seeds. And I don't want lemon balm all over my garden. I have it in a pot. It is in the mint family. It can be invasive. I once lived in a house where the lemon balm had spread all over the backyard, and every time we mowed, the entire garden smelled like pledge, which was kind of fun, but not ideal. So, because the plant has put so much energy towards making these flowers and then trying to turn into seed, this isn't the most ideal way to get a cutting. I cut these off because I don't want them to go to seed. What you do want to look for is nice healthy growth that hasn't gotten to seed yet, and you're really just going to take the very tip off here, and we're going to take off the big leaves. There's a little tiny flower trying to grow right there. And right there. We're going to take off the flowers so that the plant doesn't continue trying to create flower or seed. Because we don't want it to put all of its energy into that. Oh, getting cross-eyed looking at this tiny flower. Okay, so now I've got my little piece. I'm gonna recut the end so it's nice and clean. Dip it in water, rooting hormone, and sand. All right, so I have my golden oregano here. And this is the color it's supposed to be, but it's starting to turn a little bit darker. You could kind of see that. I don't know if you could see it in this light, but this is definitely 1 or 2 shades darker. And so I don't want to take my cuttings from these ones. I do want to take my cuttings from the golden ones because it's golden oregano. That's the one I want. I am only going to make a few of these cuttings because I'm not super happy with this plant. It gets really leggy really quickly, so I want to find a variety that I really like that has this golden color. I have to remove this plant from its location because it has morning glory all through it, and I can't use it. I can't use it for food because I'm not going to eat morning glory. That's dangerous. Thank you.
You betcha.
So I'm hoping that some of these cuttings will take so that I can replace it right there until I find a variety that I love, because I do love this color over there, and I think the legginess is really my fault. I should probably come in and trim it back mid-season. So if these take and I have more, I will try to be better about it, but I definitely have to dig it all up and get rid of that morning glory. There's just like 2 vines, but I can't get to it with this plant in place. I think the roots are kind of like growing together, so I've got to take it out anyway. So we've got our purple sage now. This one has these white little blotches. Let's see if I can show you. It's got little white blotches, and the purple has like a pink one, and the white or the green has a creamy white one. It smells so good. So with purple sage, same thing, top growth. I'm gonna pull all of the big ones off. And this one has a bunch of little tiny babies. This right here would actually make a really good cutting. So I could just snip it right there, put it in rooting hormone, and stick it in the sand. One of the things I haven't mentioned yet is when you're taking a cutting, you do want to strip off these bottom leaves. You could either pull them off or you can snip them off, but you want to do that because it creates little wounds in the stem. And wherever there's a wound, that is where roots will come out. So that all of those little wounds get dipped in hormone and put underneath the sand so the roots can grow out those wounds. The trays are all filled in, looking adorable. One of the things that you want to watch for is you don't want your leaves to be touching the sand, and you want the sand to be nice and snug against the stem so that water will touch the stem. And I did pre-moisten this, but I like to just kind of water them in a little bit just around their stems, just to make sure, just like when we do it in the ground, to make sure that it's all settled in around them. See how a couple of them fall over, so I can fix those if I know that that's what's going to happen. Now, it is September and it's still quite warm, so I do not need to put a humidity dome on this go around, but you can certainly put a humidity dome on these boxes to help get them all rooted in. I also tend to try to put my holes in windows so that they're kind of like in a diamond shape, like every other one, kind of like this. If you're a dancer or a cheerleader, you understand what a window is, but that's what I'm trying to do, is create space for the cuttings to grow in between each other. So that is all I'm going to do as far as rooting cuttings in sand today. Now I'm going to move into the perlite upstairs. All right, so this shrub right here is the Edgeworthia, or Chinese paper bush. And I have never done cuttings off of these before. Typically, I understand that they will put out stems that you can harvest from the bottom, but I don't get that. I don't get, what are those called? The shoots from the bottom. This one has never done that, but they do form their flowers on new wood. So you could actually see their flowers right here have already started forming. So I'm a little late on doing this project. You can see that. So this shrub will lose all of its leaves, and come like December, January, maybe even earlier some years, the buds will break open and it will just be this beautiful branching and these adorable white flowers with yellow throats. I adore this plant. So I'm going to try to steal a couple of cuttings that don't have flowers on them, like I'm seeing a couple like right here, I think might be able to take this little branch. I'm just gonna do maybe a half a dozen to a dozen and put them in perlite and see if they take for me. All right, so I cut my Edgeworthia, and some of them I have some really soft green cutting or green wood, opposed to how it starts turning a darker color. So you can see this is the new growth of the green, and then this is like 1 year old growth or something like that. I'm gonna try, because I've never done Edgeworthia before, like maybe 2 or 3 in the sand, just to see how that works. Because like I said, some plants just prefer sand and some do great in perlite. Because it's so small now, I am gonna cut these leaves in half. So, and then I'm just gonna stick them in the sand. I find a couple like that. I am gonna leave some. They naturally branch into these 3 pieces and they go down into the plant. The only thing that I'm watching for is, see how there's a bud forming in there? I don't know if you could see that. There's a bud forming in there. You see that little bulb right there? So I want to remove that so it doesn't continue forming a flower, and just stick to growing the plant. We'll see. And then I'm just going to literally just stick it right into the perlite as kind of close to the edge and as deep as I can, and just kind of push that around there. And that way I can go ahead and put them around and in the middle and get as many as I can in there. So behind the Edgeworthia, right here, is this hydrangea, and we're going to take a couple of cuttings off the hydrangea. They root super easy and super quickly in perlite. Again, you want to find one without a flower. You don't want those ones, but this is a beautiful specimen right here, and I'm just going to take it a couple of leaves down to right here, cut it right there, and stick that right in the perlite. And because they have such big leaves, we will cut those in half and then carry on. So actually we'll cut these ones, we can cut these ones down more. They're such a big leaf. You can cut them down by like 1/4, like that. And I'll just continue on that and put those in perlite and show you. And there we have it. You might notice that I have these in double containers, and that's because of the drainage holes. I just basically put them opposite drainage holes in here. So this container with all the perlite, it's so tiny, it'll just wash out the bottom. And so instead of a drainage hole lining up here, the drainage hole for this container is just over a little bit. It just helps it. And then you do want them kind of compact in here, and that helps the perlite touch the stem in every possible way. All right, so we've got Edgeworthia, Hydrangea, and now it's time for Eucalyptus, which is right there, that big, beautiful blue tree. So we're going to take some softwood cuttings off of that, which means that we're going to choose the stems that grew this year and they haven't had a time they haven't had time to harden up. So this is a tree. This is the trunk of the tree. This is several years old branches. This is last maybe 2-year-old branch. It's hard but still green. This tannish colored one is last year's growth. And then up here where it's really flexible and green with a touch of red, that's New Year. This is all what grew since the last time I pruned it. And I think that was last fall, I'd have to look, or early spring, one of the two. So just off of this cutting right, or just off of this one branch right here, I can get 1, 2, 3, 4 cuttings. So because I don't want these lower branches, because it's going to be a tree, I am gonna just go ahead and remove this whole branch, and all of this new growth will give me the cuttings that I need for this year. So we're just gonna go in here. It's still a fairly small diameter. It's actually in a walkway. See, there's a paver there and a paver here. I'm just gonna cut it right there. And take this downstairs to put into perlite. So we're just gonna take these guys, maybe, let's see, let's give it plenty of stem, cut it here, then I'm gonna strip these leaves off. Until they're just a few on top. This thing's about to flower too, look at that. I don't think I've ever seen a eucalyptus flower. Ray Betty's flowering. Well, we're gonna take the flowers off, that's for sure. And now I'm just gonna stick this whole stem right into the perlite. And there we have it, all of our cuttings in perlite and in sand. Plus I put the just 3 of the Edgeworthia right there in sand too, just to see, and to have a little bit left over. I'm gonna put them in a jar of water. I'll cut the stems again, just the ends, and put them in water. Now we're going to go get some heuchera. Okay, so here I have this heuchera, which I absolutely love, except for when it has holes in it. Grr. But it's just got this beautiful, deep black purple with this gorgeous purple underside. And I want more of her. So, I'm gonna look in here and see what is going on. All right, so they start creating these little extra branching pieces and make their own little baby plants. So I could actually cut that right there and have 2 separate plants, but since there's probably enough trauma for now, I'm going to take off any of the icky looking leaves, obviously. I'll probably just leave these brand new leaves on there and put them in water. Now you can see this one that I got out of there has a little bit of roots on it, which is really ideal. And I will just put that in the water with the other ones. And that's 3 little plants right there. And then we're going to come across the direction, across the block, and get a couple of those, hopefully, and show you. So you could see kind of what they do. They just sort of start looking like nests down there. Oh, you can get in there. Then you can see how this one right here is its own little plant right there. So I could cut that off and, or maybe even pull it off. Easy enough. It's got a few roots. This is a really nice big plant. Now, with something like this size, with this many roots and corm on it, I could probably clean this up and literally pop it right back into the soil right there. But because I want these plants somewhere else, I'm actually just gonna go ahead and let them root in the water. And then I'll see if I can find a baby off of this one. Okay, so just by pulling a bunch of the dead stems out of there, you can see what's going on in this plant a lot more clearly. And I just pulled them out. I can show you how this has already started to die a little bit, and it's created its own little babies here, and the mother died off, and then it has this very leggy plant, and it's not very stable. So with this one, I am actually going to go ahead, cut it off right here. Now we've got this nice big stem. I can take off these lower leaves with one hand. No, I can't. Now with this heuchera cleaned up, she'll have a lot more sun, and she won't be covered up by this other plant that was growing like this. And I can put this right here in this empty spot. Just gonna bury the stem all the way up to the leaves, and just get it out here so it has a little bit more sun. And then I'll water it in and keep my eye on it. It might lose a few lower leaves, but it'll be fine. It'll root right in there. You see how that's growing away from the mother plant? So I could just cut that right there. All right, so now I have 2 of the silver-veined purple heuchera and 3 of the super dark purple heuchera, and they're just in about 1.5 inches of water. I'll bring them in my house so they stay nice and cool, and they'll probably start getting roots on them within a week or 2 at max. I don't do anything else. I don't put any fertilizer on them. I will occasionally rinse out their water if it starts looking mucky, but that's it. Easy peasy. All right, so we've got all of that done for the day. We have all of our trimmings here, and if you wanted to, you can keep all of your trimmings. This is just, you know, sage leaves and lemon balm leaves, and Artemisia, oregano. You could save them if you wanted to. I've done so much harvesting off of these, and yeah, I'm just not going to save them this time. They're just going to go into the compost pile, which to me is not a waste anyways. And we have so many more plants now. So I've got 8 lemon thyme, I've got 8 lemon balm, I've got 6 golden oregano, 8 purple sage, 12 Artemisia, 12 pineapple sage, 3 Edgeworthia in these boxes. I've got 5 heucheras in this water. I've got 5 Edgeworthia in that water. I have a dozen eucalyptus plants, a dozen Edgeworthia plants, and half a dozen hydrangeas. And now that completes all of our cuttings. So I hope that you enjoyed this video, you got some inspiration, and maybe built up a little confidence in going out there and taking some cuttings of your own. If you have a neighbor or a family member or a friend that has a plant that you really wish you had in your garden, see if you could take 3 to 6 cuttings off of their plant. It doesn't even look like you did anything, and maybe you can have your own plant. Now, this isn't going to be 100% successful, and I'll probably share with you in future videos what the succession rates were for the cuttings and for the divisions that we did in previous videos. I'm sure that I'll share with you when I use our seeds next spring and all of that kind of thing. But it's well worth the time and effort. Even if you cut 12 and you get 2 plants, I mean, it's better than none, right? So I am gonna flip this around before I go and just show you how none of these plants look like they got any trimming off of them today. So you don't have to be scared that you're going to, decimate your plants when you want to make a couple of cuttings. So anyway, thanks a lot for gardening with me today. I hope this was an inspiration, and I hope that you continue celebrating life. So here's the Artemisia after I did my cuttings. Here is the oregano after I did cuttings, and the purple sage right here, and the pineapple sage right here. This whole thing is all pineapple sage. So you could see that it doesn't do much of anything. Here's the lemon thyme and the eucalyptus. Clearly, I took off a whole branch right there, and it doesn't look like I've done anything there. So don't be afraid to take this cutting. I don't know if I mentioned it, but I did want to point out that I watered these containers with perlite. That's all that's in there is perlite and plants. And I watered them really, really well until it was draining out the bottom. And I'll probably do that again this evening, and I'll just keep doing that at least once or twice a day unless it rains. So it doesn't dry out. And same with the sand. The sand will hold water a little bit longer, but I'll keep checking it. And you can see like this sand right there is dry. You could see the color differentiation. So it's really easy to see when those containers need some extra water. And clearly watch the water levels on the water for the cuttings. Rinse, dump them out and rinse the cup every once in a while. You can see there's already a little bit of dirt and debris from just these cuttings. So just keep your eye on it. You don't want them to get slimy. You don't want them to get extra dirty. Sometimes, bugs will get in them and die. So I always rinse them out when that happens too. So just keep them clean, keep them watered, and don't beat yourself up if, half of them die. It's perfectly fine. They're just plants. The only other thing I wanted to point out is the rooting hormone. You can't save your rooting hormone. So rinse out that cup, dry it really good, and use it for rooting hormone in the future. That's why I put the rooting hormone in a separate container rather than putting my plant directly in the rooting hormone packaging, because that contaminates all the rooting hormone. So you don't want to do that. If you're using it for multiple plants in one sitting, that's fine. But after you're done with it, discard it and start fresh for the next round of cuttings.